Logic is not just for Vulcans. We spend a lot of time talking about arguments in this class because, as I'm sure you've heard me say by now, argument is most of what we do here. Writing is working out arguments, putting arguments down on paper or screens in an effort to have other people able to read and follow and engage with your arguments. And argumentative structure and all that stuff is really important, but does the stuff make sense? A while back I was grading papers, listening to Lady Gaga as one does. Hey, I like Lady Gaga. And in between papers I was doing little things to keep my sanity, and I did a bit of research and I found out that Lady Gaga has fibromyalgia. I'm not really sure I knew that, but it did get me thinking something. Lady Gaga has fibromyalgia, but my mom also has fibromyalgia. So this must mean that my mom is Lady Gaga. I went up and I ran this theory past my wife, who looked at me frankly as if I was a little bit crazy. Now, if you look at this strictly from the argumentative structure, this isn't too far off, but there's something wrong with the logic here. The reasoning just isn't working, even though the argument structure isn't horrible in this case. There is no real logic to thinking that my mom is Lady Gaga just because they happen to have the same disease, affliction, whatever fibromyalgia is called. You think I'd know these things. So when there's a problem with the way logic is used, with the way rationality and reason is used, that's something that we end up calling a logical fallacy. So we need to explore the logical fallacies a little bit to really make sure that we grasp what we're talking about. So, not too long after we moved into our current house, we got a Dino Nugget plushie. And I've noticed that ever since we got that Dino Nugget plushie, we have not had a single house fire. Therefore, it seems pretty clear that Dino Nugget plushies prevent house fires. Again, this is one that we know there's a problem with in some way, and this is a logical fallacy called the false cause. You presume that a real or perceived relationship between things means that one is the cause of the other. You might also hear this referred to as correlation as not causality. Just because two things happen together or that one precedes the other doesn't mean that there's any causal relationship between them. This is one that the internet has a lot of fun with. This is one of my favorite ones. The number of people who drowned by falling into a pool correlates with films Nicolas Cage has appeared in. So if Nicolas Cage appears in a lot of films, lots of people drown. Obviously, that's a crap argument, but you see how the correlation causality thing works. And the argument structure can appear to be sound, but if the logic isn't working, we get something like this. Let's try a different type of logical fallacy. I'm at a regular poker game with some friends. We play about once a month, not too high stakes, but just high enough to make everyone take the game a little bit more seriously. Well, usually I do okay, but there was a stretch of like 2.5 months where I didn't win a single hand. It was brutal. I was losing everything. I was getting beat at the end. But I kept playing because I just knew that meant that I was due for a big win, right? Well, logical fallacy, the gambler's fallacy. You said that runs occur statistically independent phenomena such as roulette wheel spins. The thing is, when we look at something like runs or luck or being due for something, we tend to keep a relatively small focus. Runs do happen, but in order to be statistically significant, you need a sizable sample. And simply playing poker once a month for 2.5 months doesn't really give you enough data points to say that, okay, you're due to win or due to lose. Statistics, frankly, just does not work that way. We mistake our short-term existence for the long-term existence, which statistics really needs to succeed. Let's go for another one. Say I want to know something about football, and I don't know anything about football, so I'm going to find an athlete to teach me all about football. And I pick LeBron James. You see the problem here, right? LeBron James might be a great athlete. Does he know football? No. He's an authority in something completely different. So this is an appeal to authority, but an appeal to a false authority. If LeBron James goes on talking about football, he might do so with an air of authority. But does he have any real authority? Does he have any real knowledge about football where we should take his opinion any more seriously than my friend Joe at the sports bar? Probably not. If I picked a different example, say Bo Jackson, who was a legitimately great baseball and football player, or Deion Sanders, who was a legitimately great football and baseball player, they might be able to comment adequately on both sports. LeBron James, he doesn't play professional football, so he's not really an expert in that area. You want another one? Sure, let's go for another one. One of the things I like to do is look at the weird foods that people tend to gravitate towards, and there's nowhere better to see weird foods than at a state fair. Well, something that's been hitting the state fair circuit for about a decade or so is deep-fried butter. Now, I know what you're thinking. This can't be tremendously healthy. It has to be bad for you. But I will argue that it is healthy because we're using all natural ingredients. Do you buy that one? Well, you really shouldn't, because this is another logical fallacy. The appeal to nature. Just because something is natural, it is therefore valid, justified, inevitable, good, or ideal. That's not the case. There are plenty of things that are artificial that are good. There are plenty of things that are natural that are bad for us. We can't say just it's natural, therefore it's awesome. It doesn't work that way. You want some examples? Poison ivy is all natural. Do you want to be around a bunch of that? You want another example? Glasses are in no way natural whatsoever. If this class is anything like my average class, anywhere from 1/3 to 2/3 of my students have corrective vision. If nature is better, why don't we throw away our glasses and our contacts? Nature isn't a good enough reason. These are only a few of the logical fallacies. There are tons more. When we see arguments, we have to not just pay attention to the way the argument is structured, because structure is important. Having evidence to support your cause is important, but how we connect things does require us to use reason and logic. And if we don't, the findings can be very questionable. And there can be real-life consequences for using bad logic to make decisions. So the more aware we are of logical fallacies and how they're tripping us up, the more we can come to a better understanding of how the world really works. And if we want a personal consequence, I've played music for a while, and I've seen lots of people who are really talented musicians who do very well. Lots of people like them. Cream rises to the top and all that. So you see someone who's playing to a lot of people, the assumption can be, hey, they must be really talented. I've played music in the area for a long time, off and on, and I've played more than once to a completely and utterly empty room. So, if people who play to large crowds are talented, if I'm playing to no crowd, that might mean I suck. And that might lead to a certain amount of self-doubt. There are a lot of factors really involved on whether someone is popular or not, and we can't judge popularity and talent and skill as related issues. There might be some relationship there, but there might be a lot of other things. My personal thought is how well you market yourself is a very underrated element of whether someone is popular or not. If they're performing, if they're trying to sell their art. And it might just be, I suck at the marketing angle, but I'm really talented. But if I don't think through that logic, if I just go to the basic level of, this person plays for a lot of people and is really talented. I play for hardly anybody, therefore I must suck, and I might as well quit. The self-doubt, the imposter syndrome can really trip me up and knock me out. Of course, there's always the possibility that it might be a net positive for the world if I quit playing music, but we'll move on from that one. So those are logical fallacies, and as I said, only a small portion of them. Now, looking at logic as one of these things, it's going to make you see a lot of arguments in a completely new light when you listen to any kind of authority figure. Are they putting together the bits of their argument in ways that make rational sense? And it's not just in authority figures, but it's something that you should think of when you think about how we relate to the world in general. More people in this country die in accidents in swimming pools than get eaten by sharks. Hardly anyone gets eaten by sharks, yet see a shark fin in the water, everyone's going to panic like living hell. See a swimming pool, which is statistically a whole lot more dangerous for us, and we don't think much about it. We're weird that way. But if you start trying to see how rationality and logic works, you're going to get a more accurate view of our reality, which is going to help you in a whole lot of ways, I think. See you next time.